Let me begin by expressing my appreciation to Chairman and Ranking Member of the Middle Eastern Subcommittee, Ms. Ross Leitonen of Florida, and Mr. Deutsch of Florida, for their good work on this legislation. And I'm pleased to have worked with Mr. Engel and the leadership to ensure that this legislation was scheduled for the floor today for consideration. Speaker, this legislation places responsibility for the escalation in violence squarely where it belongs, with the Iranian-backed terrorist group Hamas. Hamas is deliberately targeting Israeli civilians through the use not only of rockets, but longer and longer range missiles, 2,500 of these so far, aimed at cities, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, attempting to attack Israeli communities. Remember, these attacks are at civilian populations. They're not at military installations. And perpetuating the kidnapping and murder, which started with 3 Israeli teenagers. But again and again, we've seen these incursions through these tunnels, 32 tunnels, new tunnels found so far, 3 miles into Israeli territory. And one of the amazing things when you go into the tunnels and you see not only how they're used for these attacks, but what they have in reserve in these tunnels. Ropes, syringes, tranquilizers, handcuffs, explosives, walls and walls of explosives. These were attempts to inflict mass casualty attacks on the civilian population. $100 million is approximately what was spent on these tunnels, at the expense, I might add, of the Palestinian people. That's 4,000 trucks of equipment coming in over the border from Israel with cement, which was presumed to be used, hopefully, for schools or hospitals, with cement, with aggregate, with steel, instead used for the construction of these tunnels tunneling under Israel. Less than 10 years ago, Israel pulled out of Gaza. The Strip was going to flourish without Israel's control. That was what we were told, but it wasn't supposed to be this way. It wasn't supposed to be a situation where Hamas would take resources and plow it in to terror day by day. Today, the Gaza Strip is a terrorist sanctuary on Israel's borders, with sanctuaries within this sanctuary that we now know of, 32 of these tunnels. Beyond targeting Israeli civilians with kidnapping and indiscriminate firing of rockets, Hamas shows a callous disregard for the lives of the Palestinians it ostensibly represents, and that's the purpose of this initiative here today, to call attention to the fact, and earlier this month, the Hamas spokesman, Sami Abu Zori, appeared on Al-Aqsa television and encouraged Gaza residents to act as human shields. That's the responsibility they ask as they're hidden down in these tunnels, as they're in these bunkers. They ask their civilian population to go and make of themselves human shields in front of rocket launchers. The world can't let terrorists embed their forces among the civilian population, using them as human shields without speaking out. This is a direct violation of international humanitarian law and the law of war, sacrificing the innocent in an effort to protect those engaged in terror from an Israeli response. Hamas is engaging in a crime of enormous proportions, perpetrated by those who are deliberately hiding among civilians to protect themselves. According to the Geneva Convention, the presence of the civilian population or individual civilians shall not be used to render certain points or areas immune from military operations, in particular, in attempts to shield military objectives from attack or to shield, favor, or impede military operations. That's the Geneva Convention. A full court press to discredit Israel is on in the United Nations. My question is, where are the defenders of international law in condemning Hamas's use of human shields? You know, I saw the report. There's no mention in there of the rockets being fired against Israel. Yes, this is a case where Israel is using missile defense to protect its civilians, and Hamas is using their civilians to protect their missiles. It is a case where we have to recognize Israel's right to defend its people by taking necessary and appropriate force to neutralize the threat posed by Hamas. Think about the recent discovery that Israeli security sources unearthed. Evidence that Hamas was preparing to dispatch 200 terrorists via 10 tunnels towards 6 Israeli communities with the goal of killing and kidnapping scores and scores of Israelis on the Jewish New Year. If that was on our border with Canada, how would we react? I urge all of my colleagues to support this resolution, which takes a strong stand against Hamas's crimes. And I reserve the balance of my time.